Hello, I'm Ken Hoffman, one of the corporate Gemba coaches here at Worthington Industries, and today we are going to do Transformation 2.0 in a page. So what we see here are some terms that should be familiar to most of you. So we look at transformation as two parts, daily improvement and strategic improvement. And we're going to look at daily improvement as it happens at the cell level, as it happens at the value stream level, and then strategic improvement, where that generally happens, is at the facility level, at the functional level, or at an SBU. So how we're going to do this is we're going to look at who does the improvement, the structure of that improvement, the frequency with which that improvement takes place, the activity that goes on to drive that improvement, how we identify gaps, i.e. how we figure out what problems we're going to work on, how we get to the root cause of what that problem is, how we then go about doing problem solving, and then if that doesn't solve the problem, how do we escalate the problem to get resolution. So where we're going to start is at the cell level for daily improvement. So who does that? That's going to be a natural work team. So when we say natural work team, we're talking about a cell that runs the 72-inch slitter in the Columbus steel mill, or a weld cell in one of our cylinder plants. Or in support functions, it could be an inside sales team. It could be an IT support team. It could be a team in finance. So any of those natural work teams are expected to perform daily improvement. What structure do we use to drive that? That's where the performance board comes in. So you'll have heard about a performance board. What do we mean when we say performance board? That's generally that 5-foot, 5-second view of, are we winning, are we losing? Are we ahead of schedule, are we behind schedule? So tracking that through our performance board to look at how we're doing. How frequently do we do that? The general guideline is we look at performance board is generally scheduled hourly. There are some functions that would look at that less frequently. So some support functions, it may not make sense to look at hourly production. You may have a task that you're only doing once a week or once a month. So obviously looking at how am I doing on an hourly basis isn't really going to give you any information. So what is the activity that happens to drive that problem solving on a daily basis? That's where we've got our daily huddle. So what is the huddle? The huddle is a block of time that we're setting apart to dedicate to problem solving for those daily problems that are coming up. Generally on an operations setting out in the plant floor, that's 10 minutes per shift. Could be more in a, again, support function, may do it less frequently, but spend more time doing it. So it may be 30 minutes that you're spending once a week. But generally, we're looking at 80% of that time spent on problem solving, maybe 20% of that time is communication, but it's dedicated time that the team, again, this natural work team, is getting together to solve their problems. So how do we identify the gaps? How do we figure out what problems we want to solve? We look at our problem tally. So on that performance board, one of the sections in there is the problem tally, and that's where we're going real time, documenting the issues that we're getting every hour, or however frequently we're updating it, and we're saying how frequently or how impactful is that problem. So what I want to know is how many times does it happen and how much is it impacting my production? Whatever that production may be, whether it's manufacturing a product in steel or cylinder, or whether it's performing a task in the office. Once I've identified what that problem is, my next step is I need to figure out why it's happening. So I want to do root cause analysis. What we'll typically see are two general tools that we use, which are the fishbone and the 5-why. Those aren't the only tools you can use. Instead of fishbone and 5-why, we could do a spaghetti diagram. We could use a lot of other tools. But the point is we want to understand what the root cause is of that problem. What's really driving that impact? I don't want to treat the symptom. I want to treat the root cause with the goal of making sure that that problem never happens again. I want to avoid recurrence at all costs. So once I've identified my root cause, what do I want to do? How do I solve my problem? At the cell level, what we use are rapid experiments. So this is that application of the scientific problem solving methodology, if we, then we. So I say, if I do this, here's what I expect to have happen. I try what I want to experiment with, and I document the results. Did my expected result happen? If so, did my problem go away? If it didn't solve my problem, what am I going to try next? What did I learn? A rapid experiment that doesn't work isn't a failure, it's a learning opportunity. So we didn't fail, we learned. We're just going to try another opportunity and say, I'm going to try a different experiment. What can I try next to solve that problem? Another point is, don't get too hung up on the rapid point of rapid experiment. A lot of people see that and they think, that's got to be something I can do in 5 minutes or a day. A rapid experiment may take you days or weeks to accomplish. That's still a rapid experiment solving a daily problem. Okay, now if I try these things and that doesn't happen, if I try 4 or 5 different attempts to solve that root cause and I can't solve it, or it's out of the control of that natural work team, what do I do? How do I escalate it? I then utilize that Gemba walk that comes around, and they're going to escalate it to the daily accountability. So oftentimes in the plant, what we'll encourage folks to do is, in their hot topics section of their performance board, write down the help they need so that when their leadership comes around on the Gemba walk, that's your opportunity to ask for help and say, I need help solving this problem. So that's cellular level daily improvement. Now, taking it up a level, we're going to see the same concepts applied to a value stream. So again, the value stream is application of this thinking across the product family. So rather than just a singular cell, I'm going to apply it to my value stream. So the who of the value stream is broader than a natural work team. Now the who becomes management. So that's that middle level of management, supervisors, etc., that are looking at how my value stream is performing. What is my structure? Instead of a performance that I have at the cellular level, now all of a sudden I have the MDI board. So managing daily improvement. MDI generally we structure as people, customer, velocity, and cost. Doesn't need to be those 4, that's our standard, but some representation of kind of that SQDC model is how we look at that structure. How frequently am I doing that? Now we're looking at this daily. So instead of hourly, I'm looking at it daily. And the intent is, how can I now make my month, right? How can I make my longer period of time than the hourly section, which is how do I make the shift, how do I make the day? So the activity that happens at MDI now is the Gemba walk. In the plants, we start each Gemba walk at the MDI board. We progress out onto the floor through the performance board and process control boards if we have those in place, and we end at daily accountability. That cadence is designed to say, okay, let me look at MDI, which is that top level view of the health of my value stream. So I go there and it's the equivalent of that 5-foot, 5-second view, but rather than winning or losing at a work cell level, now it's winning or losing at the value stream. How am I performing across those 4 or 5 or 6 critical metrics? Okay, I'm looking at that every day, and I'm starting at the the Gemba walk there. And how do I start that analysis? How do I know what to work on? I'm looking at those top level metrics. So that's identifying what my gaps are. Each of those top level metrics should be trended metrics, should have trended data, and it should have a goal. If I have a gap between my goal and how I'm performing, I've identified my gap. So my next step is, again, identifying the root cause of that gap. Why is that gap occurring? To get there, now I perform analysis. So my MDI board is laid out with metrics on top. My next row is analysis. What am I doing in analysis? I'm drilling down into that top level metric through a Pareto, through some other form of analysis that says, this is why that gap exists. Once I understand the gap at the value stream level, now I have to put a countermeasure in place. So my problem solving tool is a countermeasure. Now, what is a countermeasure? Frequently what we'll see is a task. I'm going to call someone, I'm going to set up a meeting. Many of you, hopefully all of you, would be able to tell me that calling someone or setting up a meeting does not solve my problem. So a true countermeasure is an action that's going to close that gap between how I'm performing and my target or my goal. Okay? If I go through and I perform countermeasures and that doesn't work, and I'm not able to close that gap, now how do I escalate? Where does that go? what I'm going to do is I'm going to escalate that to Steerco, and frequently what will happen is I'll create a project or an event. And that will escalate up into more of a strategic improvement directive than just daily improvement. Okay? So now we're going to transition over and talk a little bit about strategic improvement. So the difference here is this is where we should start to see those step changes in performance. Rather than the small incremental solutions that you'll get on a day-by-day basis in daily improvement, strategic improvement are those large step changes in performance. So how do we fundamentally change how we're performing? We don't generally do strategic analysis at the cell level. We sometimes do it at the value stream level. So we'll do an annual VSA where we look at it there. But again, now we're starting to look at across a facility where you might have multiple value streams, across the whole function. So when I'm looking at IT, or I'm looking at finance, or I'm looking at supply chain, how am I going to change how I behave? Or across an entire SBU or business unit, how am I doing that? So now who's going to do that strategic analysis and strategic improvement rather than the operators on the floor at the work cell? Now we actually get senior leadership performing those changes. What's the structure that they're using to do that? Now we get into mission control. So what is mission control? That's really nothing more than the roadmap that takes us from our high-level strategy that you'll see in A3s or plant scorecards or functional scorecards, and translating that to the tactical activities that we are actively engaged in or that we have planned to get us through the next 6 to 12 months to get to that target condition that we've identified. Okay? So how frequently are we meeting in mission control in Steerco? Ideally, the standard is weekly. So once a week, we'll have a Steerco meeting where senior management is going to get together and they're going to go through that mission control room and talk about how we're doing. The activity that I just described, that's Steerco. So what are they asking? What is that activity doing? It's saying, am I moving towards that target condition that I've created or not? Right? Every week we should be asking that. So all the activity that we're doing, is it taking me closer to where I want to be or not? How do I identify my gaps for Steerco? I'm looking at my VSA 9 box. I'm looking at a plant scorecard. Again, same trended metrics with a goal. So again, this is scaling up. So you have trended metrics with a goal at the cell level, that is, how is that work cell performing? You have trended metrics with a goal at the value stream level, which is, how is my value stream or product family performing? And then you have trended metrics with a goal across the facility. So how is my whole plant functioning? How is my function performing? How is my business unit or a sub-business unit performing? So again, these just scale up. So now I've identified what my gaps are across my VSA through that process and documented them in a VSA 9 box. How do I get to root cause? So now I've identified very specific activities that I'm going to work on. So to get to root cause, now I'm actually utilizing a separate project or event 9 box. So we have a lot of documentation out on the Knowledge Center you can go look at. There are videos on how a 9 box works. There's a 9 box template. There's a 9 box training module. You can look at all of those to get more detail on a 9 box. But to understand the root cause, you're really looking at boxes 1 to 4 of that project or event 9 box. So to do the actual problem solving, we're still going to use that 9 box tool because we're using that as our problem solving methodology for projects and events. But now we're going to look at boxes 5 to 8. So that's where you actually identify what your solutions are, you track them, you track your impact on your metric. Are you improving your performance or are you not? Escalation now becomes a little bit different for strategic improvement. So where at the cell level you're actually escalating to the value stream management team through the Gemba walk and daily accountability, and at the value stream you're escalating to that senior management and Steerco. Now it's Steerco, you've already escalated, and who is your senior leadership. So you don't really have someone to escalate to. So how do you escalate? You actually utilize corrective actions, and that's escalating across that same team. So that's an accountability across the senior leadership team to say, this is what I'm going to do to fix those gaps that aren't being closed. So corrective action is those things that I need to do, those tasks I need to perform to make sure that anything in mission control that is out of standard, so any abnormal condition, whether I have a project or event that's behind, whether I have a metric that isn't trending where it's supposed to, I will put a corrective action in place to get that back on track. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is Transformation System 2.0 in one page. We will have an electronic version of this sheet up so that you can see kind of how the pieces fit together, so you can link to this. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to reach out to any of your resources in corporate transformation. Thank you.